Ladies and gentlemen, Robert Downey Jr.
Do you remember me?
Robert Downey Jr. just said something that broke the internet. In April 2026, he called modern influencer culture absolute horse. Chot.
I don't know what world you're living into, but I think that is absolute horse.
But what made it shocking was not the insult itself. It was who said it. A man who once served prison time as inmate 50522. A man who lost everything to drugs before age 35. A man who knows fame from its darkest corner. So why is RDJ suddenly attacking the system that saved his career? The answer goes much deeper than anyone expected. Robert Downey Jr. was born into a world that was already broken before he even understood what broken meant. His father, Robert Downey Sr., was not just a filmmaker. He was also a drug addict. And one of the darkest truths about RDJ's childhood is that his father gave him drugs when he was still a little boy. At just 6 years old, Robert was drinking white wine and smoking marijuana at home, with his father handing it to him directly. By the time he was 8, the damage was already starting to show. Years later, RDJ admitted something deeply painful. He said that when he and his father did drugs together, it felt like his father was trying to show love in the only way he knew how. That one detail explains so much. For Robert, love, chaos, and addiction got tangled together almost from the beginning. And it was not as though there was another safe parent standing nearby to pull him out of that world. His mother, Elsie Ford Downey, was a talented actress, but she was struggling too. She battled alcoholism while his father fought drug addiction, and both of them were buried in the strange, chaotic world of Greenwich Village at the time, surrounded by underground art, counterculture energy, and constant substance abuse. So Robert did not grow up in a normal home with rules and stability. He grew up in a place where fame, dysfunction, and self-destruction all lived in the same room. Then, when he was just 12 years old, his parents' marriage collapsed. After the divorce, he moved into a fifth-floor apartment in New York City with his mother, while his sister went to live with their father. Even before Robert had any success of his own, he had already seen how messy ambition could become, and how badly adults could fall apart while chasing meaning, attention, or escape. That kind of childhood did not leave him with much solid ground to stand on. And because of that, his early life kept moving in every direction at once. He was constantly relocated because of his father's film work, living in places like Woodstock, London, New Mexico, California, Connecticut, and Greenwich Village, all before he was even done growing up. He spent part of his youth at Stage Door Manor, an acting camp in upstate New York, when he was 11 and 12. Acting was already around him all the time, but school never really became something stable in his life. Nothing stayed still long enough for that. Then, in 1982, at just 16 years old, he dropped out of Santa Monica High School and made a decision that would shape everything after it. He chose to chase acting full-time. Most teenagers that age are still trying to figure out who they are. Robert was already throwing himself at Hollywood with no backup plan, no emotional safety net, and a home life that had taught him chaos more than discipline. In some ways, though, that choice had been made for him long before he ever understood it. Robert Downey Jr. got his first movie role when he was only 5 years old. In 1970, he appeared in Pound, a film written and directed by his father, and he played a sick puppy. 2 years later, at age 7, he showed up again in Greaser's Palace, another one of his father's films. This was not some sweet childhood memory, where a proud dad let his son have a tiny part in a family project. His father was a provocative underground filmmaker working far outside the Hollywood mainstream, and Robert was being pulled into that strange creative world before he was old enough to really choose anything for himself. Acting was not just a dream that came later. It was built around him from the start. His career began before he could properly understand what a career even was. Because of that, Robert did not grow up looking at fame from a distance. He saw its ugliest side up close while he was still a child. His parents hosted underground film parties in Greenwich Village during the late 1960s and early 1970s, and those gatherings were filled with drugs, alcohol, unstable personalities, and people living on the edge of art and collapse. He later said in his 2022 documentary about his father that he knew they were not like other families. That line says everything. Most kids imagine fame as something shiny and far away. Robert saw it from the inside, and what he saw was addiction, confusion, broken adults, and a kind of glamour that always seemed to come with a price. But even after seeing all of that, he still ran toward Hollywood. In a way, that makes sense. It was the only world he truly knew. Once he stepped into it for real, the rise came fast. In 1985, when he was just 20 years old, RDJ landed roles in both Tough Turf and Weird Science. In Weird Science, the John Hughes hit, he played a bully and suddenly found himself around some of the hottest young names in Hollywood. Tough Turf also came through a connection with James Spader, not through some clean, simple path. So the machine started moving quickly around him. He was becoming famous, while still barely old enough to understand what fame could do to a person. And that was the real danger. Nobody sat him down and showed him how to survive it. Nobody taught him how to handle attention, ego, pressure, or temptation. He was young, talented, visible, and very much alone in ways that mattered. The next year only pushed that feeling harder. In Back to School in 1986, RDJ starred alongside Rodney Dangerfield, a comedy legend who had been commanding audiences for decades. But what shocked people was not just that Downey held his own. It was that he kept stealing scenes. Critics noticed it. They pointed out how sharp and natural his comic timing was. And praise like that can be dangerous when it lands on someone who already feels unstable underneath. For Robert, it did more than build confidence. It fed the idea that he was special, maybe untouchable, maybe destined for something bigger than everyone else. And when that kind of belief gets mixed with addiction, old wounds, and no real structure, it can become fuel for self-destruction just as easily as success. That is why Less Than Zero in 1987 feels so important in the story. On paper, it was a breakthrough. RDJ played Julian, a rich young drug addict whose life falls apart on screen, and the performance earned serious critical praise. But what made it haunting was how real it was. Later, Robert admitted that before that film, he mostly took drugs after work and on weekends. Then something changed. He said the character was an exaggeration of himself, and then he became an exaggeration of the character. That is terrifying. He was only 22 years old and already starring in a role that looked like a warning about his future. Except it was not just a warning, it was already happening. Around the same time, he got another hard lesson in how cruel fame could be. During the 1985 to 1986 season, RDJ joined Saturday Night Live at just 20 years old. It should have been huge. Instead, it became a public disaster. That season's cast was heavily criticized, the ratings dropped, and by the end of the run, RDJ and most of the others were fired. It was not some quiet failure tucked away in the background. It happened in public. Rolling Stone even named him the worst SNL cast member in the show's history. For someone who believed he was headed for greatness, that had to sting. And yet, even that humiliation did not slow the bigger pattern. If anything, it sat next to his growing success and made the contradictions inside his life even more extreme. By the time he hit his mid-20s, the split between the image and the reality was getting harder to ignore. He had a leading man role in The Pickup Artist and strong critical attention from Less Than Zero. From the outside, it looked like the career was working. But underneath, The damage from childhood was still there, and the substance abuse that had entered his life so early was becoming part of his identity. By then, people in the industry were already whispering. He started showing up late, unprepared, or visibly impaired. He was not blacklisted yet, but the warning signs were there. The talent was obvious. The danger was obvious too, and both were growing at the same time. Then came Chaplin in 1992, the moment that should have changed everything. RDJ's performance as Charlie Chaplin was extraordinary. He learned to play violin, studied Chaplin's physical movements for months, and delivered the kind of work that made people stop and say this was not just another promising actor anymore. This was greatness. Critics praised him heavily, and he earned an Academy Award nomination for Best Actor. For a while, it looked like he had arrived exactly where people thought he would. The next great actor of his generation. The kind of performer who could do anything. But even here, at the peak, something dark remained underneath. He lost the Oscar to Al Pacino for Scent of a Woman. And while some people still argue about that result, the more important truth is what happened around it. Even with all that talent and all that praise, studios were already getting nervous about his behavior. The industry could see the brilliance, but it could also see the risk. And that is what makes this part of the story so brutal. Even at his highest point, the fall had already started. What came next was not one mistake. It was years of collapse. On the night of June 23, 1996, sheriff's deputies pulled over RDJ's Ford pickup on Pacific Coast Highway in Malibu, after he was caught speeding at 70 miles per hour in a 50 zone. What they found inside sounded less like a movie star's car, and more like evidence from a crime scene. There was black tar heroin, crack cocaine, powdered cocaine, and an unloaded .357 Magnum revolver. He was already 31 years old by then, already an Oscar nominee, already someone the world knew. And yet, there he was, falling apart in full view. He was booked and faced felony drug charges, along with a concealed weapon charge. Hollywood had seen stars spiral before, but this felt different. It was shocking, public, and impossible to brush aside. And somehow, it got even stranger almost immediately. After that arrest, Downey was placed on probation and ordered into drug counseling, but he kept failing program after program. Then on July 20, 1996, while court ordered to stay at a rehab facility after another arrest, this time for wandering into a neighbor's Malibu home while intoxicated, he escaped through a bathroom window without shoes. It sounds unreal, but it happened. He fled barefoot, was tracked down within hours, and taken straight to jail. The image is almost too perfect in the worst way. A gifted actor, once seen as one of the brightest stars of his generation, now literally climbing out of rehab windows and running shoeless into another arrest. By December 1997, a judge finally sentenced him to 180 days in LA County Jail for violating probation again and again. Still, even that was not the bottom. By 1999, RDJ had missed multiple court-ordered drug tests, burned through 6 rehab programs, and used up nearly every bit of patience the system had left. Judge Lawrence Mira had clearly had enough. He called him manipulative and sentenced him to 3 years at the California Substance Abuse Treatment Facility and State Prison in Corcoran. Downey was 34. He had one of the best actors in the business inside him, and now he was heading to state prison. He ultimately served about 15 months before early release, but the damage to his image was already enormous. It is rare for an A-list actor in modern Hollywood to serve real prison time. RDJ did. That alone shows how far things had gone. And while he was trapped in that nightmare, the career kept moving on without him. In the late 1990s, as he was either locked up or legally unable to work, American Psycho was being cast. The role of Patrick Bateman would go on to become one of the most iconic performances of the decade after Christian Bale took it in 2000. For Downey, It became one more painful reminder of what addiction had stolen from him. Not just health, not just freedom, but the roles, momentum, and chances that might have changed his career much earlier. It is one thing to lose jobs quietly. It is another thing to watch entire eras pass you by. Then, there is the line that may say more about his state of mind than anything else. In 1999, standing in a Los Angeles courtroom before prison sentencing, Robert Downey Jr. said, "It's like I've got a shotgun in my mouth with my finger on the trigger, and I like the taste of the gunmetal." That is not a celebrity quote polished for headlines. That is a man describing what addiction felt like from the inside. He knew he was destroying himself. He knew the danger, and part of him still wanted it. That may be one of the most chilling things ever said in a Hollywood courtroom because it does not sound dramatic. It sounds honest. Then, in one of the strangest turns of his story, success tried to come back before he was ready to hold on to it. In January 2001, RDJ stood on stage at the Golden Globes and won Best Supporting Actor in a TV series for Ally McBeal, where he played attorney Larry Paul. To the public, it looked like a miracle comeback. The applause was loud. The story was perfect. The fallen star had returned. But beneath that moment, the truth was uglier. Just 6 weeks earlier, on November 25, 2000, he had been arrested at Merv Griffin's Resort Hotel in Palm Springs and found in a room with cocaine and methamphetamine. So while he smiled on that stage and thanked people, he was still carrying fresh charges and slipping again behind the scenes. That is what made this period so tragic. The comeback looked real from a distance, but underneath, the ground was already cracking. And then the illusion collapsed again. On the night of November 25, 2000, during Thanksgiving weekend, an anonymous caller phoned 911 and reported that a man in room 3111 at the Merv Griffin Resort had cocaine, guns, and seemed upset. Police arrived and found Downey alone, surrounded by cocaine and methamphetamine. He was cooperative, but the damage was done. He was charged with possession, being under the influence, and committing a felony while out on bail. This happened just a few months after he had been released from Corcoran State Prison on August 2, 2000. Think about that for a second. He barely had time to step back into the world before falling again. Then came one of the coldest professional endings of his life. On April 24, 2001, Culver City police found him wandering and arrested him for being under the influence of cocaine. He was not even formally charged that time, but it no longer mattered. By the next morning, he had been fired from Ally McBeal. Producer David E. Kelley released a brief statement saying they were wrapping up the final episodes of the season without him. And just like that, his character was written out, quietly, coldly, almost as if he had never really been there. Later, RDJ said this hurt more than prison, more than tabloids, more than the public disgrace. That tells you how much it meant. Prison took his freedom, but this took away the hope that he had truly rebuilt something. After years of drug arrests and jail time, Downey had become uninsurable. That meant studios saw him as a risk they could not afford because insurance companies refused to cover him. Then Mel Gibson stepped in. The two had become close after working together in Air America in 1990. And when The Singing Detective came around in 2003, Gibson made a move that changed everything. He had originally been set to star in the film himself, but instead he gave the lead role to Downey. He went even further than that. Gibson personally paid Downey's full insurance bond out of his own pocket. If Downey had relapsed on set, even once, Gibson would have lost all of that money himself. But he did not relapse. He finished the film clean, and that single act of trust cracked the door open again. Still, one movie did not fix everything. Far from it. The years that followed were brutal, and that part of the story rarely gets enough attention. Between 2003 and 2007, Downey appeared in 13 films. Most of them were not giant hits. They were supporting roles, indie films, and mid-budget projects that kept him working while he slowly rebuilt his name. Even then, people were cautious. On Gothika in 2003, producer Joel Silver agreed to hire him only under one hard condition. 40% of Downey's salary would be held back until the entire shoot was finished, just in case he relapsed. Downey took the deal because he had no real leverage. He was not climbing back through one big lucky break. He was doing it one set at a time, one performance at a time, proving to people over and over that he could show up and finish the job. That same period also brought the person who changed his life in a much deeper way. Downey met producer Susan Levin on the set of Gothika in 2003. He was newly sober then, but after filming ended, he slipped and relapsed briefly. Susan saw that side of him up close. She later described it as meeting his Darth Vader side, and she made her position clear immediately. She told him it would not work unless nothing like that ever happened again. Downey later said that moment hit him hard. He drove to a Burger King near the Pacific Coast Highway, pulled over, and threw the drugs he still had into the ocean. That was in July 2003. Years later, he openly said Susan saved his life. He also admitted something painful and honest. If she had fully understood how deep his addiction had gone, they probably would not have ended up together at all. But they did. They married in the Hamptons on August 27, 2005. And from there, his life finally began to stabilize. Then came Zodiac in 2007, and this mattered more than it might seem. David Fincher's sets are known for discipline, repetition, and extreme control. He is famous for shooting 50 or more takes of a single scene and running production with near-military precision. For a man trying to stay steady, that kind of environment turned out to be exactly right. Downey played Paul Avery, the San Francisco Chronicle journalist who covered the Zodiac killer case and who had his own history of substance abuse. That overlap gave the role extra weight, and critics noticed right away. One writer from the Tuscaloosa News called it one of Downey's best performances. Manola Dargis said he was at the top of his performance game. Surrounded by actors like Jake Gyllenhaal and Mark Ruffalo, Downey suddenly looked fully real again as a serious actor. Not just a comeback story people were nervously watching from a distance. He followed that with Charlie Bartlett in 2007, and the role hit even closer to home. In that film, he played Nathan Gardner, a divorced school principal battling substance abuse while trying to keep his life from falling apart. The part felt so close to Downey's real past that some critics found it unsettling. Lou Lumenick of the New York Post wrote that Downey used his own life experience with drugs to shape the performance, giving it a serious undertone beneath the comedy. Another reviewer said it was chilling because it was hard to tell where the character ended and the actor began. That is what made the performance so powerful. It did not feel fake. It felt lived in. It felt personal. In a way, Downey was not just acting there. He was putting pieces of his worst years on screen and turning them into something honest. And that is what made the next step so unbelievable. In 2008, Jon Favreau fought to cast Robert Downey Jr. as Tony Stark in Iron Man. And at the time, many people thought that decision was insane. Downey had multiple arrests behind him. He had served prison time as inmate P50522. He was still seen by many executives as unstable and dangerous to bet on. For Marvel, the stakes were enormous. Iron Man was not just another movie. It was the studio's first self-financed film, the movie that would decide whether Marvel had a real future on its own. Executives were nervous, and for good reason, but Favreau did not back down. He believed Downey was Tony Stark. That confidence changed everything. Even then, no one expected what happened next. Iron Man was made on a budget of $140 million, and when it opened, it exploded. The film made $98.6 million in its first weekend across 405 theaters. At that point, that was the 11th biggest opening weekend in history. By the end of its run, it had earned $318.6 million in the United States and $266.8 million overseas, for a total of $585.4 million worldwide. Marvel had already sold off many of its biggest characters like Spider-Man and the X-Men to other studios, so there was no guarantee that a B-tier hero in a metal suit could carry a franchise. But Downey's performance changed the whole equation. He was sharp, funny, loose, dangerous, and completely magnetic. He did not just make Iron Man work. He turned it into the foundation of what would become the biggest movie franchise in history. By the time the Avengers arrived in 2012, the transformation was complete. The man who could barely get insured a few years earlier had become the center of Hollywood's biggest machine. The film made $1.519 billion worldwide and became the third highest-grossing movie ever at that time. Downey's deal was on another level, too. He had negotiated back-end points that reportedly earned him around $50 million from the Avengers alone. At the same time, some of his co-stars like Chris Evans and Chris Hemsworth had earned only around $200,000 to $500,000 for their first Marvel appearances. That one movie helped make Downey the highest-paid actor in Hollywood for multiple years in a row. Just 9 years earlier, studios would not trust him. Now the entire industry was chasing what he had. Then came the ending that sealed the whole saga into movie history. In April 2019, Avengers: Endgame became the highest-grossing film in the world, passing Avatar with $2.798 billion at the global box office. Downey's final line, "I am Iron Man," became the emotional peak of the entire film. It was not even part of the original script. It was reportedly suggested on set as a callback to the first Iron Man, where Tony Stark shocked everyone by openly revealing his identity. That line connected the beginning and the end in one perfect moment. It closed an 11-year journey across 22 films. The same actor who had once been written off as a lost cause had become the face of a franchise worth more than $22 billion. And then, somehow, the story kept going. On March 10, 2024, at the 96th Academy Awards, Robert Downey Jr. won the Oscar for Best Supporting Actor for playing Louis Strauss in Christopher Nolan's Oppenheimer. The film won 7 Oscars in total, tying Universal Pictures' all-time studio record that had previously been set by Schindler's List. It also made $952 million worldwide. Downey's performance was one of the quietest in the film, but also one of the sharpest. He was controlled, cold, and quietly vicious, and that made it land even harder. The full arc felt almost unreal. In 1999, he had been sitting in a California prison cell as inmate P50522 on drug charges. 25 years later, he was standing on the Oscar stage holding one of the most prestigious awards in the industry. But even after that, Downey never became a polished celebrity who moved through life like a machine. He still had moments where his edge showed, and those moments often reminded people why he stayed so compelling in the first place. In April 2015, during press for Avengers: Age of Ultron, he sat down with Channel 4's Krishnan Guru Murthy for what should have been a routine promo interview. Instead, the questions suddenly veered away from the movie and into Downey's addiction history and his relationship with his father. Downey paused, looked uncomfortable, and asked, "I'm sorry, what are we doing?" His team quickly ended the interview. He smiled, waved, said, "Bye," and walked out on camera. The clip spread everywhere. People argued over whether the interviewer had crossed a line, but the moment made one thing clear: Downey was not going to let anyone drag him backward for a cheap headline. That same refusal to play by standard rules was part of what made him so powerful during Iron Man. According to Gwyneth Paltrow, Downey would often walk into Jon Favreau's trailer in the morning, look at the script pages, and say, "I'm not fucking saying these lines," before tossing them out. Then he, Paltrow, and Favreau would reshape scenes together, sometimes in the trailer, and sometimes right there on set. Paltrow even stopped memorizing certain lines because she knew they would probably change anyway. The energy that made Tony Stark feel alive came from that looseness. Even the final "I am Iron Man" line from the first movie was reportedly written just minutes before shooting, and Downey nearly did not say it. Yet that line ended up defining the whole MCU. Then came one of the wildest turns in his career. On July 27, 2024, at San Diego Comic-Con, Marvel President Kevin Feige announced that Robert Downey Jr. was returning to the MCU. But he was not returning as Tony Stark. He was returning as Dr. Doom. The room exploded. Online, fans split almost instantly. Some called it brilliant, others called it lazy, and said it betrayed Iron Man's legacy. One fan flatly wrote, "This feels so lazy." Later, director Joe Russo revealed that Downey had become deeply obsessed with the role, writing his own backstory notes and even working on costume ideas. Avengers: Doomsday is set for release on May 1, 2026, which means Downey is once again stepping into the center of the Marvel machine, only this time from the darkest possible angle. That shock return became even more dramatic because of what happened next. For months in 2025, fans kept speculating that Downey might secretly appear in the Fantastic Four, first steps before making his full debut as Dr. Doom. Director Matt Shakman publicly denied that any cameo existed, so most people dropped the idea. Then the movie came out, and the mid-credits scene changed everything. A figure crouched in front of Franklin Richards slowly turned around, wearing Doom's green hood and cape, with the mask in hand. It was Downey. No build-up, no warning, no official reveal. He had been there the whole time, hidden in plain sight. It was one more reminder that even now, he still knows how to control a moment better than almost anyone. And off-screen, he has not exactly mellowed into vague celebrity wisdom either. In April 2026, Downey appeared on the Conversations for Our Daughters podcast with tech innovator Bran Ferren and started talking about influencer culture in a way that instantly grabbed attention. He said, "People today can create celebrity by doing little more than filming themselves with a phone." But his point was not as simple as just mocking the internet. What interested him was what that does to the value of real talent. If everyone has a platform, then simply being visible means nothing. What matters is whether there is anything real underneath it. He called that challenge individuation, the process of becoming a truly distinct human being in a world flooded with content. He got even harsher when he compared modern influencers to evangelical hucksters of the information age. That was not a random insult. He backed it with something personal. He said his own teenage son had gotten pulled into that world and was ready to send money to a gaming influencer just for watching him play. Downey described the whole dynamic as almost cult-like. In his view, the danger is not just that influencer culture is silly. It is that it trains people to confuse attention with value and performance with substance. And he did not soften it with PR language either. When someone asked whether influencers were the future of stardom, he answered bluntly that the whole thing was absolute horse. No polished fence sitting, no carefully neutral answer, just a straight rejection. That alone made headlines everywhere within 2 days, especially because Downey knows better than most celebrities how carefully public image can shape a life. For someone who spent years repairing his own reputation, that kind of raw honesty stood out. Still, what made his comments more interesting was that he was not actually speaking from pure cynicism. His idea about individuation went deeper than a simple celebrity rant. He was basically saying that in the past, access used to be rare. A camera, a studio, an audience, those things were hard to reach. Now billions of people have phones, apps, and platforms, which means access itself means almost nothing. So the real value has shifted. The hard part now is not getting seen. The hard part is becoming someone worth seeing. someone with actual craft, someone with real input and real output, someone building something instead of just broadcasting themselves. And for all his criticism, he did end on something hopeful. He said he believes the smarter part of the next generation will eventually reject that empty chase for attention. He said he hopes young people will decide they want to make something, build something, and educate themselves instead of getting trapped in self-glorifying content loops. He also admitted that he keeps his own social media use limited, because the more casually he posts his life, the more he risks creating a fake version of himself. To him, that kind of performance is just BS.